The transport ship Dawn's Edge moved slowly through the dark space toward Kepler Station. Inside the passenger deck, people sat quietly in their seats. Most were miners going to work in the asteroid fields. Some were traders looking for new business. A few were just travelers trying to get far away from the inner worlds. In seat 47B, sat a man who looked like he was in his 40s. His hair was black with some gray at the sides. His clothes were simple and clean, but old. Carried only a small brown bag that looked like it had been with him for many years. The man stared out the small window at the stars. He did not talk to anyone during the long journey. When other passengers tried to start conversations, he would nod politely and give short answers. Then he would turn back to the window. His eyes had a distant look, like he was seeing things that were not there. The ship's captain announced over the speakers that they would dock at Kepler Station in 30 minutes. People began to gather their things and prepare to leave. The man in 47B waited until everyone else stood up, and he picked up his bag and walked calmly toward. The exit Kepler Station was huge. It spun slowly in space to create artificial gravity. The station was humanity's farthest outpost, sitting at the edge of known space. Beyond it lay the mysterious regions where alien empires ruled. Ships came and went from Kepler Station every day, bringing supplies and taking away rare metals. From the nearby asteroid fields, Commander Higgins stood at the observation deck watching the Dawn's Edge dock. She was responsible for all civilian operations on the station. Her job was to make sure everyone who arrived had proper papers and a reason to be there. She watched the passengers walk off the ship through the connecting tube. Most of the people she recognized. The regular miners, the trading crews, the family members coming to visit, but there was one man she did not know. He walked with steady steps and kept his head up, but something about him seemed different. He moved like someone who was used to being in charge, even though his clothes and bag suggested it was just another worker. The man approached the registration desk where Captain Dongwu was checking papers. Dongwu was head of station security, was a careful man who noticed details about people. Name, Dongwu asked, looking at his computer screen. The man placed a data pad on the desk. The papers are all there. Dongwu looked at the screen as it read the information. The documents were perfect. They showed the man had come from Earth's moon colony and was looking for work, but where the name should be, there was just a number and the word citizen. I need your name for the station records, Dongwu said. The man looked at him with calm eyes. The papers are legal. That's what matters. Dongwu studied the man's face. There was something about his eyes that made the security chief uncomfortable. They were not threatening, but they held a kind of knowledge that seemed too deep for an ordinary traveler. Still, the papers were correct, and the man had not broken any laws. What kind of work are you looking for? Dongwu asked. Anything? That needs doing. Can you work with machines? Yes. Plants and growing systems? Yes. Dongwu made some notes on his computer. Report to engineer Sa Young in the hydroponics section tomorrow morning. She needs extra help with the food growing. Systems. The man nodded and picked up his bag. Thank you. As he walked away, Dongwu watched him go. The man moved through the crowded station corridors like he knew exactly where he was going. Even though this was supposed to be his first time there, the man found the civilian quarters section and rented a small room. It was basic, but clean, with a bed, a desk, and a small window that looked out at space. He set his bag on the bed and sat down in the chair by the window. For a long time, he just stared out at the stars. The same distant look was in his eyes, like he was remembering things from long ago. Sometimes his hands would move slightly, as if he was giving orders to people who were not there. Later that evening, he walked to the station's common area, where people went to eat and relax after work. The room was full of conversation and laughter. Miners talked about their work in the asteroids. Traders discussed prices for rare metals. Families shared stories about life on different worlds. The man bought a simple meal and sat at a table, in the corner where he could watch the room but not be noticed easily. He ate slowly and listened to the conversations around him at the next table. A group of station workers was talking about the news from the inner worlds. The Vrex Empire has been moving ships around again, one of them said. My cousin works On a military base near Tau Ceti, he says everyone is nervous. The aliens are always moving ships, another worker replied. That doesn't mean anything. This is different. The coalition sent out new warnings to all the outer stations. They want us to be ready for anything. The man at the corner table seemed to listen more carefully to this conversation. His hands stopped moving, and his eyes focused on the group. Of workers? Ready for what? A third worker asked. Nobody knows, but Admiral Kunjo himself sent the message. That means it's serious. When the workers finished their meal and left, the man sat alone for a while longer. He looked out the large windows at the space beyond the station. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between the stars, alien ships moved with purposes that humans could only guess at. Finally, he stood up and walked back to his room. Tomorrow he would start work in the hydroponics bay, would tend plants and fix machines and try to live quietly like any other person on the station. But as he lay on his narrow bed that night, staring at the ceiling, his mind was full of thoughts about ship movements and military preparations and the delicate balance that kept peace between humans and aliens. Outside his window, the stars watched silently, keeping their secrets about what the future might bring to Kepler Station and the man who had arrived without giving his name. 3 weeks passed since the nameless man arrived at Kepler Station. Every morning at exactly 7 o'clock, he walked to the hydroponics bay where engineer So-young supervised the food-growing systems. She had worked on the station for 5 years and knew machines better than most people knew their own families. On his first day, So-young expected to spend hours teaching the new worker how the growing systems worked. The machines were complicated and needed careful attention. Most new people took weeks to learn even the basic tasks, but the nameless man surprised her. When she showed him the water recycling system, he understood it immediately. When she explained the nutrient mixing controls, he nodded and began working, as if he had done it before. By the end of the first week, he was fixing problems that So-young had not even noticed yet. Where did you learn about machines like these? She asked him one morning as they checked the tomato-growing beds. The man looked at the green plants growing under the artificial lights. You pick things up over time. But these systems are only used on space stations and long-range ships. Most people never see them. He was quiet for a moment. I've traveled a lot. So-young wanted to ask more questions, but something in his voice told her he would not give more answers. Still, she was happy to have such a skilled worker. The hydroponics bay had never run so smoothly. The man worked with quiet efficiency. He spoke only when necessary and never complained about any task. When the other workers took breaks, he kept working. When they talked and laughed during lunch, he sat alone and ate quickly. Then he would go back to the machines. Dr. Yoonji first noticed him during the second week. She was the station's xenobiologist studying alien life forms and cultures. Her laboratory was near the hydroponics bay. She often saw the man working through the transparent walls. What caught her attention was how he moved. Most people, working with delicate equipment, moved carefully and slowly. But this man moved with absolute confidence. His hands never hesitated. He never had to look twice at a control panel or think about which tool to use. One afternoon, Dr. Yoonji was walking past the hydroponics bay when she heard a loud alarm. The main water pump had failed, and nutrient solution was flooding the floor. So-young was frantically trying to shut off the emergency valves, while other workers ran around looking for tools. The nameless man moved past all of them to a control panel on the far wall. His fingers moved over the controls faster than Dr. Yoonji could follow. Within 30 seconds, the flooding stopped. Within 2 minutes, he had the backup pumps running. A repair that should have taken hours was finished in less than 10 minutes. How did you know about that backup system? So-young asked, breathing hard from running around. I've worked here for 5 years, and I didn't even know those controls existed. The man was already cleaning up the spilled nutrient solution. The system layout is logical. If there's a main pump, there must be backups. But Dr. Yoonji had seen the control panel he used. The labels were in 3 languages, including alien script from the Centauri Alliance. Most humans could not read those symbols. She made a mental note to watch this man more carefully. During the third week, the station held a routine emergency drill. All civilian workers were supposed to report to emergency shelters when the alarm sounded. The drill tested how quickly everyone could reach safety if the station was attacked. Security Chief Jinho watched the drill from the command center. Most people moved slowly and talked to each other as they walked to the shelters. Some stopped to ask questions. Few seemed confused about which way to go. But on one of the security cameras, Jinho saw the nameless man moving very differently. While everyone else walked casually, the man moved with purpose and speed. He took the most direct route to the nearest shelter. He helped an elderly woman who was walking slowly. He quickly checked 3 side corridors to make sure no one was left behind. His movements reminded Jinho of trained military personnel during real emergencies. This was not the behavior of a civilian worker who had never experienced combat. When the drill ended, Jinho pulled up the man's registration file on his computer. The information was correct, but basic. No criminal record. No military service listed. No previous jobs except general labor. But something felt wrong about it. The file was too clean, too simple. That evening, Dr. Yoonji was working late in her laboratory when she heard voices from the corridor outside. Through her door, she could see into the common area where several miners were drinking and talking loudly. The miners had just returned from a month working in the asteroid belt. They were celebrating and drinking more than they should. Dr. Yoonji recognized them as rough men who sometimes caused trouble when they drank too much in the common area. She saw 3 alien refugees sitting at a corner table. They were Kelvani, a peaceful species whose homeworld had been destroyed in a war between 2 larger empires. Several Kelvani families lived on Kepler Station now, working quiet jobs and trying to rebuild their lives. The drunk miners noticed the aliens and began making loud comments. "Look at the bug eyes," one miner said. "Taking jobs from real workers?" The Kelvani tried to ignore the comments and finish their meal quickly. But the miners got louder and more aggressive. They moved closer to the alien table. "Hey, bugs," another miner said. "This section is for humans only." One of the Kelvani, an elderly male, stood up slowly. "We are causing no trouble," he said in careful human speech. "We will leave." But the first miner grabbed the alien's arm. "You'll leave when I say you can leave." That was when the nameless man appeared. Dr. Yoonji had not seen him enter the common area. Suddenly he was there, standing between the miners and the aliens. "Let him go," the man said quietly. The miner was much larger than the nameless man, and very drunk. "Mind your own business, worker." What happened next took less than 5 seconds. The miner swung his fist at the nameless man's face. The man moved slightly to one side, caught the miner's wrist, and twisted it in a way that made the big man drop to his knees in pain. The man's other hand pressed against a pressure point on the miner's neck. The drunk man fell unconscious. The second miner tried to grab the nameless man from behind. Without turning around, the man stepped backward, drove his elbow into the attacker's stomach, then grabbed the man's shirt and threw him over his shoulder. The miner hit the floor hard and did not get up. The third miner was reaching for a bottle to use as a weapon when the nameless man looked at him. Something in those calm eyes made the miner freeze. "Your friends will wake up in a few minutes," the man said. "Take them back to their quarters." The third miner nodded quickly and helped his unconscious friends. Dr. Yoonji watched all of this through her laboratory door. The nameless man had moved like a trained fighter, but his techniques were precise and controlled. He had disabled 3 aggressive men without seriously hurting any of them. After the miners left, the man turned to the Kelvani family. "Are you injured?" The elderly alien looked at him with large, grateful eyes. "No injury. Thank you for helping us." The man nodded and walked away. As if nothing unusual had happened, Dr. Yoonji sat in her laboratory for a long time that night, thinking about what she had seen. The man's fighting skills were professional level. His movement techniques were military. His calm control under pressure suggested extensive combat training, but according to his file, he was just a civilian worker with no military background. Dr. Yoonji decided she needed to learn more about the mysterious man who had come to their station without giving his name. The alarm started at 0347 station time. It was not the gentle sound of a routine drill. This was the harsh, urgent wail that meant real danger was coming to Kepler Station. Admiral Kuncho, Eng Ho, was pulled from his sleep in the military quarters. His aide, Lieutenant He Wan, burst through the door with news that made his blood run cold. Sir, long-range sensors show 15 Vrex warships dropping out of hyperspace. They're moving directly toward the station. Kunho was dressed and running toward the command center within 2 minutes. Behind him, the station's defense systems were coming online. Red emergency lights flashed in every corridor. The voice of Commander Heejin echoed through the speakers. All civilian personnel report 2 evacuation stations immediately. This is not a drill. Pete, this is not a drill. In the hydroponics bay, the nameless man heard the announcement while he was checking the night cycle systems. The other workers around him looked confused and frightened. Most had never heard a real combat alarm before. Saw Young ran into the bay, her face pale with fear. "Everyone to the evacuation ships," she shouted. "Leave everything and go now." The workers began moving toward the exits, but they moved slowly, still not understanding how serious this was. The nameless man watched them for a moment, then looked at the ceiling where speakers were giving updates. Vrex fleet now consists of 3 battle cruisers, 8 destroyers, and 4 support vessels. Estimated arrival time is 47 minutes. Man's expression changed. For the first time since arriving at the station, his calm mask slipped slightly. He knew what those ships could do. He knew how the Vrex fought, and he knew that Kepler Station's defenses would not be enough. In the command center, Admiral Kung Ho was getting reports that confirmed his worst fears. The station had 2 light cruisers and 5 patrol ships for defense. Against 15 Vrex warships, they had almost no chance. "Send out the distress signal," he ordered. "Tell Fleet Command we need immediate reinforcement." "Sir, Lieutenant," Haewon said quietly, "the nearest coalition fleet is 6 hours away." Everyone in the command center understood what that meant. The battle would be over long before help could arrive. Meanwhile, the evacuation was not going well. There were 3,000 people on Kepler Station, but the evacuation ships could only carry 2,000. Someone would have to stay behind and hope the station's shields could protect them. The nameless man was supposed to be in Evacuation Group 7, but when his group was called, he was not there. Security Chief Jin-ho noticed his absence when he checked the lists. "Where's the worker from hydroponics?" Jin-ho asked Captain Dongwoo, the one without a name. Dongwoo looked at his scanner. His ID beacon shows he's still in the civilian areas, but that was wrong. The nameless man had moved far from the civilian areas. He was walking through restricted corridors that led to the military sections. His movements were confident and purposeful, like he knew exactly where he was going. The security doors that should have stopped him somehow opened when he approached them. The ID scanners that should have rejected his civilian status somehow accepted him. Later, no one would be able to explain how he had bypassed the station's most secure systems. Dr. Yoonji was in Evacuation Group 3, but she was helping too. Organize the alien refugees who were confused by the emergency procedures. She saw the nameless man walking in the wrong direction, away from the evacuation ships. "Wait," she called to him. "The evacuation ships are this way." He stopped and looked at her. His eyes had changed. The distant, careful look was gone. They were sharp and focused, like a person preparing for battle. "You need to get on a ship and leave this place," he said. "What about you?" "I have something I need to do." Before she could ask more questions, he was gone. Moving quickly through a maintenance corridor that led toward the station's core systems. In the command center, the situation was getting worse. The Vrex fleet had spread out into attack formation. Their lead ships were powering up weapons that could punch through the station's shields in minutes. "Commander." Haijin was trying to coordinate the defense when alarms started going off at the tactical stations. "Sir," a technician called out. "Someone is accessing the main tactical computer. The access is coming from inside the station." "That's impossible," Admiral Kung Ho said. "Those systems require command-level authorization." But on the screens they could see that someone was indeed in the tactical system. Whoever it was had knowledge of military codes that should have been known only to senior officers. Security Chief Jin Ho ran toward the tactical center with 2 guards. What he found there made him stop and stare. The nameless man sat at the primary tactical console. His hands moved over the controls faster than Jin Ho had ever seen anyone work. Multiple screens around him showed ship positions, weapon systems, and shield configurations. "Stop right there," Jin Ho shouted, drawing his weapon. "Step away from that console." The nameless man did not look up from his work. "In about 30 minutes, this station is going to be under attack by 15 Vrex warships. Your current defense plan will result in the complete destruction of Kepler Station and the death of everyone who could not evacuate. Not authorized. To be here, authorization doesn't matter when everyone is about to die." The man's fingers continued flying over the controls. "Your shield generators are not aligned properly. Your weapon targeting systems are using outdated Vrex ship specifications. And your patrol ships are positioned where the Vrex expect them to be." Ginho kept his weapon pointed at the man but did not fire. Something about the man's confidence and knowledge made him hesitate. On the screens, the tactical display was changing. The nameless man was adjusting shield frequencies, reprogramming targeting computers, and repositioning the defense ships into formations that looked strange, but somehow felt right. Commander Hajin arrived with more guards. She saw what was happening and opened her communication channel to Admiral Kung Ho. "Sir, you need to see this. The civilian worker is in the tactical center, and he's making changes to our defense systems. Arrest him immediately." But before anyone could move, the man spoke without looking away from his screens. "Your patrol ship Ranger is about to move into position C7. If it does that, it will be destroyed by concentrated fire from 3 Vrex destroyers in the first 2 minutes of combat. Move it to position D3 instead, and it can use the asteroid. Field for cover while targeting the enemy ship's weapon systems." Everyone in the tactical center looked at the displays. The man was right. The Ranger was indeed moving towards C7, and the Vrex formation would allow them to target it easily. "How? Do you know that?" Commander Heejin asked. "'Cause I know how the Vrex fight." Admiral Kyung Ho's voice came through the speakers. "Commander, what's the status of our tactical systems?" Heijin looked at the screens, then at the nameless man who was still working. The defensive formations he had created looked more sophisticated than anything their own tactical officers had planned. "Sir," she said carefully, "our systems have been ... improved." "By who?" The nameless man finally looked up from the console. For the first time since arriving at the station, he spoke with the voice of someone who was used to being in command. "Admiral, you have 18 minutes before the VX reach weapons range. I've made some adjustments to your defenses, but they're not enough. You're going to need to trust me if you want to save this station." There was a long silence from the speakers. Then Admiral Kyung Ho's voice returned, tight with tension. "Who are you?" The nameless man turned back to his console. "Someone who's fought the Vrex before." Outside the station, the enemy fleet was getting closer. Their weapons were powering up, and their shields were at full strength. We're confident that this would be an easy victory. They were about to learn that someone on Kepler Station knew their weaknesses better than they knew them themselves. The first Vrex weapons hit Kepler Station's shields at exactly 043 for station time. The massive energy beams created brilliant flashes of light as they struck the protective barrier around the station. The shield generators hummed with strain, but they held. In the command center, Admiral Kung Ho watched his tactical displays with growing amazement. The nameless man had predicted exactly where the Vrex would attack first. Shield adjustments he had made were deflecting damage that should have been devastating. "All ships execute pattern Delta 7. The nameless man's voice came through the command channels. He had somehow gained access to the fleet communication system. Captain Dongwu, who was watching from the security station, recognized something familiar about the man's command style. The way he spoke, the timing of his orders, the tactical terms he used, it all reminded him of stories from his military academy days. The Coalition patrol ship Ranger followed the man's instructions and moved to position D3, using the nearby asteroid field for cover. When 3 Vrex destroyers targeted the position where Ranger had been supposed to go, they found empty space instead. "Ranger, target the lead destroyer's port weapon array," the nameless man ordered. "Fire when ready." Ranger's weapon struck the wrecked ship precisely where its shields were weakest. The destroyer's main guns went offline, reducing the enemy's firepower significantly. How did he know that weakness? "Lieutenant Hay-1?" asked Admiral Kung Ho. The admiral was wondering the same thing. The man seemed to understand Vrek's ship design better than their own intelligence reports did. Meanwhile, the nameless man was implementing strategies that seemed impossible. He ordered the station's industrial equipment to be converted into weapons. The massive mining lasers that normally cut through asteroids were turned toward the enemy ships. Engineer Sa-Young received orders to modify the cargo handling systems. "This is crazy," she muttered as she followed the instructions. But when she saw the results, her complaints stopped. The cargo launchers were now firing chunks of metal at incredible speeds, creating a defensive barrier around the station. "Industrial Base 7, prepare for gravitational assist," the nameless man announced. The station began to rotate faster than normal. The increased spin created artificial gravity changes that affected the space around Kepler Station. To Vreks. Fighters that came too close were caught in the gravity well and crashed into each other. Dr. Yunji was still in the evacuation area, but she was watching the battle through the observation windows. She saw tactics being used that she had only read about in military history books. The nameless man was fighting the Vreks, using their own aggressive nature against them. "All evacuation ships hold position," came the order. "Maintain distance, but do not leave the area." The evacuation ships had been ordered to flee, but now they were being told to stay. Some of the ship captains protested, but something in the commanding voice made them obey. The nameless man had a plan for the evacuation. Ships too. The battle was turning in ways no one had expected. The Vreks had come expecting an easy victory against a lightly defended station. Instead, they found themselves fighting an opponent who seemed to know their every move before they made it. The coalition cruiser. Dawn's Light received complex maneuvering orders that seemed suicidal at first. Captain Jamin, commanding the cruiser, hesitated for a moment. "Dawn's Light, this is tactical command." The nameless man's voice was calm and confident. "Execute the pattern exactly as ordered. Trust the mathematics." Something in that voice made Captain Jamin follow the orders. Dawn's Light dove toward the enemy formation at an angle that exposed it to multiple Vrek ships. But just as the enemy weapons fired, the cruiser used the gravity from a nearby asteroid to slingshot around and behind the Vrek's battle line. The enemy shots missed completely, and Dawn's Light found itself in perfect position to attack the Vreks. "Command ship from its unprotected rear." Now the nameless man ordered. Dawn's Light fired everything it had. The Vrek's command ship's shields collapsed, and its communication systems went dark. Suddenly, the enemy fleet was fighting without coordination in the tactical center. Security Chief Jin Ho was watching the nameless man work with fascination and growing suspicion. The man's knowledge was too detailed, too precise. He knew things about Vrek's tactics that were not in any public records. "The evacuation ships will now execute the final phase," the nameless man announced. The civilian evacuation ships suddenly changed course. Instead of fleeing, they spread out in a wide pattern around the battle area. At first it looked like they were trying to surround the Vrek's fleet, which seemed hopeless since they were unarmed. But the nameless man had not forgotten that. Evacuation ships carried one thing in large quantities: emergency flares. "All evacuation ships deploy flares on my mark," he ordered. Hundreds of bright flares suddenly filled the space around the Vrek's fleet. The intense light confused the enemy sensors and made it impossible for them to target accurately. The Vrek ships began firing at shadows and false readings. While the enemy was blinded, the coalition ships moved into perfect attack positions. The Vrek's fleet commander realized what was happening. Ships were being systematically destroyed by an opponent who seemed to understand Vrek's military doctrine better than the Vreks themselves did. In desperation, the enemy commander opened a communication channel to Kepler Station. "Attention, human commander." The Vrek's voice was filled with anger and frustration. "Your tactics are familiar to us. We know who you are." Everyone in the command center listened as the alien continued speaking. You are the one called the Ghost of Proxima. You cannot hide from us forever." The words sent shockwaves through everyone who heard them. The Ghost of Proxima was a legend from the Great War 15 years ago. He was the human commander who had defeated the largest Vrex invasion fleet in history. But the Ghost of Proxima had disappeared after the war. Most people believed he was dead. Admiral Kyung-ho stared at the nameless man with new understanding. Captain Dongwoo felt his suspicions confirmed. Dr. Yoonji, listening from the evacuation area, finally understood why the man had seemed so familiar. The nameless man continued giving orders as if nothing had changed. But his cover was blown. The Variks had identified him, and soon everyone would know who he really was. "Ghost of Proxima," the Variks commander continued. "We will not make the same mistakes we made at Proxima Centauri. We have learned from our defeat." For the first time during the battle, the nameless man responded to the enemy directly. "Then you should have learned to retreat when you still could." The coalition fleet pressed their attack. 3 more Vrek ships were destroyed. The enemy formation was collapsing. Finally, the Vrex commander gave the order his fleet had never expected to hear. "All ships withdraw. Turn to hyperspace immediately." The remaining Vrex vessels turned away from Kepler Station and jumped back into hyperspace, leaving behind the wreckage of their defeated comrades. The battle was over. Kepler Station had survived. In the sudden quiet that followed, all eyes turned to the nameless man who was still sitting at the tactical console. His hands had finally stopped moving over the controls. His shoulders sagged slightly, as if a great weight had settled on them. He was no longer just a mysterious civilian worker. The Vrex had identified him as the Ghost of Proxima, the greatest military hero in human history. The man who had been hiding from his own legend could hide no longer. Commander Haijin was the first to speak. "Is it true? Are you really him?" The man looked at the tactical display one more time, checking to make sure all coalition ships were safe. Then he stood up and turned to face the people who had been watching him. His expression was tired, but calm. The mask he had worn for weeks was finally gone. "My name is Taemin," he said quietly. "And yes, I am the one you call the Ghost of Proxima." The silence in the command center stretched for long minutes after Taemin revealed his identity. Everyone stared at the man who had just saved their station. The Ghost of Proxima was supposed to be a legend, a story told in military academies. But he was standing right in front of him, looking tired and older than the hero from the history books. Admiral Kyung-ho was the first to recover from the shock. He'd been a young lieutenant 15 years ago when the Battle of Proxima Centauri happened. Every military officer knew that story. The human fleet had been outnumbered 5-1 by the largest Verx invasion force ever assembled. Everyone expected humanity to lose its most important colony world. "You were declared dead," Admiral Kyung-ho said quietly. "After Proxima, you just vanished. Search teams looked for you for months." Taemin turned back to the tactical console and began shutting down the battle systems. His movements were slower now, as if revealing his identity had drained some of his energy. "I left," he said simply. "The war was over. I was not needed anymore." Dr. Yoonji had rushed back from the evacuation area when she heard the news. Carried a tablet computer with her, and on the screen was an old photograph from the Coalition military archives. The picture showed a younger Taemin in an admiral's uniform, standing beside the wreckage of a massive Rex battleship. "This picture was taken after Proxima," she said, holding up the tablet. "You were 31 years old. You had just led the greatest victory in human military history. The Coalition wanted to give you every medal they had." Once a man glanced at the picture, then looked away quickly. "That was a long time ago. The records say you've saved over 50 million people on Proxima Centauri," Commander Haijin said. "The Vrex were going to destroy the entire planet. You stopped them. At what cost?" Taemin's voice was quiet but filled with pain that had been hidden for 15 years. Everyone waited for him to explain, but he continued working at the console instead. Finally, Dr. Yoonji sat down in a nearby chair and opened more files on her tablet. "The official reports say the Battle of Proxima was a complete victory," she said. "But there are classified sections that most people never see. What really happened out there Timon stopped working and stood very still. His hands rested on the console, but they were shaking slightly. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. We were losing. The Vrex had better ships and more of them. Their plan was to destroy our fleet first, then kill everyone on the planet below. 50 million civilians with nowhere to run. Security Chief Jinho moved closer, listening carefully. This was history that had never been told publicly. I had a choice, Taman continued. I could fight a traditional battle and lose everything, or I could use tactics that would win the war but cost thousands of my own people their lives. Yoonji found the casualty reports in her files. The numbers made her feel sick. 12,000 coalition personnel died at Proxima, most of them on your own flagship. 14,237, Taman corrected her. I know the exact number. I remember every name. He turned around to face them, and they could see the weight of those memories in his eyes. The only way to defeat the Vrex fleet was to get close enough to target their command ships directly, but that meant flying through their entire formation. While they concentrated all their firepower on us, Admiral Kyung-ho understood military tactics well enough to realize what that meant. You used your own ships as sacrificial decoys. The heavy cruiser Incheon drew the attention of 6 Rex battleships while the destroyers Seoul and Busan attacked from the flanks. The Incheon was destroyed with all hands, but the plan worked. You broke their formation and destroyed their command structure. Taman walked to the observation window and stared out at the stars. My flagship Daegu carried 3,000 people. I ordered them to ram the Vrex supercarrier at maximum speed. The impact destroyed both ships, but it created the opening we needed for the final attack. You were on the Daegu when it rammed the enemy ship, Commander Hyjin asked. I was supposed to be. But 15 minutes before the ramming attack, my officers forced me into an escape pod and launched me away from the ship. They said the coalition needed me alive to finish the war. The room was completely quiet now. Everyone understood what Taman had lived with for 15 years. He had won humanity's greatest victory by ordering his own people to die. The escape pod was found 3 days after the battle, Dr. Yoonji said, reading from her tablet. But when rescue teams reached it, you were gone. I could not face the families of the people who died for my decisions. I could not accept medals and honors when so many had given everything. So I disappeared. But you saved 50 million lives, Lieutenant Haewon said. The sacrifice was worth it. Taman's reflection in the window looked back at him with eyes that had seen too much. Tell that to the wife of Commander Park, who died on the Incheon. Tell that to the children of Captain Kim, who went down with the Seoul. Tell that to the parents of the 3,000 young people who followed my orders and flew their ship into certain death. Captain Dongwoo stepped forward. He had been quiet during most of the conversation, but now he spoke with the voice of someone who understood military service. They followed your orders because they trusted you. They died because they believed. In the mission and in protecting innocent people, that is what soldiers do, I know, Taman said. That knowledge has followed me every day for 15 years. I tried to live quietly, to work with my hands instead of commanding fleets. I thought if I stayed away from war, I would not have to make those kinds of choices again. Dr. Yoonji looked at the tactical displays that still showed the results of the recent battle, but today you made similar choices. You risked lives to save the station. Today was different. I found ways to win without sacrificing coalition ships. I have learned that there are sometimes better solutions than the ones I saw 15 years ago. The galaxy has been looking for you, Admiral King-ho said. There have been rumors and reported sightings on dozens of worlds. Some people thought you were dead. Others believed you were living somewhere in secret. I have been living in secret, working on cargo ships, mining operations, farming colonies, places where no one asks questions about your past. Engineer So Young, who had been listening from the doorway, finally spoke up. That's why you knew so much about different machines and systems. You really have traveled everywhere. I learned to fix things instead of breaking them. It seemed like a better way to live. Commander Hyjin activated her communication system. I need to send a report to Coalition Command. They have to know you're alive. Wait, Taman said. Quickly, please. I am not ready to be that person again. You already are that person, Dr. Yunji said gently. What you did today proves that you never stopped being a protector. You cannot run from who you are. Through the observation window, they could see the evacuation ships returning to dock with the station. Families were reuniting. Workers were returning to their jobs. Life was continuing because of the choices Tommen had made. The war changed. Me, he said finally. I am not the same person who commanded fleets 15 years ago. No, Admiral Kung Ho agreed. You are better. The young admiral, who won at Proxima, was brilliant but reckless. Today I watched someone who had learned wisdom. Along with tactics, Tommen was quiet for a long time, thinking about what they had said. Finally, he turned away from the window and looked at the people who had witnessed his return to the role he had tried to abandon. If word spreads that I am alive, the Verrex will come back. It will bring more ships and better preparations. This station will become a target because of me. Let them come, Security Chief, Jinho said. We have seen what you can do. Now we know who you really are. Question is, Dr. Yunji said, what do you want to do now that your secret is revealed? Tommen looked around the room at the faces of people who had trusted him during the battle. They were still willing to trust him now, even knowing the price the trust might require. Outside, somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Vrex fleet was reporting back to their commanders. They would tell their leaders that the ghost of Proxima had returned. Soon, all of known space would know that humanity's greatest military mind was alive and active again. The quiet life that Tommen had built for himself was over. The only question now was what he would do with the life that remained. The news spread through human space like wildfire. Within 6 hours of the battle at Kepler Station, every coalition base knew that Admiral Tommen, the ghost of Proxima, was alive. Within 12 hours, the information had reached the highest levels of government. Within 24 hours, it had leaked to news networks across 100 worlds in his small quarters on Kepler Station. Tommen sat quietly reading the reports on Dr. Yunji's tablet. His hands were steady now, but his face showed the weight of knowing that his hidden life was completely over. The president of the Coalition Council wants to speak with you personally, Dr. Yunji said, sitting across from him in the small room. 3 different news networks are offering enormous amounts of money for exclusive interviews. I don't want to talk to politicians or reporters. No, but you should see this other report. She showed him intelligence data that had arrived from Coalition Command. The Vrex Empire had been mobilizing fleets for months, preparing for a massive invasion of human space. The attack on Kepler Station had been just a test to see how humans would respond. They were testing our defenses, Tommen said, understanding immediately. Now they know we are weaker than we were 15 years ago. The Coalition has fewer ships now. Most people thought the war was over. Military spending was reduced. Many experienced officers retired. Tommen studied the fleet positions shown on the tactical map. The Vrex had assembled nearly 200 warships along the border. The Coalition could field maybe 60 ships to defend all of human space. They waited until they thought I was dead, he realized. The Vrex believe they can win now because their greatest enemy is gone. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Commander Heijin entered, followed by Admiral Kuncho. Both officers looked tired from dealing with the flood of communications that had followed the revelation of Tommen's identity. Sir Admiral Kung Ho said, Coalition High Command is sending a delegation here. They want you to return to active duty immediately. With what rank? Dr. Yunji asked, Supreme Commander of all Coalition forces. They are offering you complete authority over every human military unit. Tommen was quiet for a long moment. Rank they were offering was higher than any he had held before. It would give him power to make decisions that could affect billions of lives. And if I refuse, Admiral Kung Ho's expression was grim. Then humanity will face the Vrex invasion, with divided command, old tactics, and inferior numbers. The military analysts estimate we would lose within 6 months. Later that evening, Tommen walked alone through the corridors of Kepler Station. The battle damage had already been repaired, and life was returning to normal. Workers talked and laughed as they went about their duties. Children played in the family areas. People were living their lives without fear because they trusted that someone would protect them. In the hydroponics bay, Engineer So-young was working late to replace plants that had been damaged during the battle. When she saw Taemin, she smiled and waved. "The tomatoes you helped me plant are growing well," she said. "They should be ready for harvest in a few weeks. I might not be here to see them. You're leaving?" Her smile faded. "But this is your home now." "I don't think I have a home anymore." So-young set down her tools and looked at him seriously. "You saved all of our lives. Every person on this station owes you their future. That makes this place your home as much as anywhere else." In the common area, Taemin found the Kelvani family he had helped weeks earlier. The elderly alien approached him with the slow, respectful movements of his people. "We heard the news about who you are," the Kelvani said in his careful human speech. "We are honored that such a great leader helped us when we were in trouble. I'm not a great leader, just someone who happened to be in the right place. Great leader is someone who helps others even when no one knows his name. That is exactly what you did." The next morning brought a shuttle from Coalition Command. It carried 5 admirals, 2 government officials, and enough security personnel to protect a small planet. He set up a temporary command center in one of the station's conference rooms. Admiral Sulky, the current head of Coalition Military Command, was a woman in her 50s who had been a young captain during the Great War. She had served under Taemin's command at 2 different battles. "The situation is critical," she told him without wasting time on greetings. "The Vreks are preparing to launch simultaneous attacks on 12 human worlds. We cannot defend them all with our current resources." "What about the other alien species?" "In the Coalition?" Taemin asked. "The Centauri, the Altarians, the others we fought alongside before? Many of them have their own problems. Vreks have been stirring up conflicts throughout the galaxy. Most of our allies are too busy defending their own worlds to help us." Admiral Sulky activated a holographic display that showed the entire border region between human and Vrek space. Red markers indicated Vrek's fleet positions. Blue markers showed Coalition forces. The difference in numbers was frightening. "Need you," she said simply. "Not just for your tactical knowledge, but for what you represent. When people hear that the ghost of Proxima has returned, they will believe we can win. And what if I make the same mistakes I made 15 years ago? What if I have to order people to die again? Then you will carry that burden, as all leaders must. But you will also save millions of lives that would be lost without your leadership." Taemin studied the tactical display for a long time. His mind automatically began calculating fleet movements, supply lines, and battle strategies. Even after 15 years away from command, his brain still worked like a military computer. Dr. Yoonji entered the conference room with Captain Dongwoo, Security Chief Jin Ho, and Commander Haijin. They had come to support whatever decision he made. "Have you decided?" Dr. Yoonji asked. "I spent 15 years trying to forget how to be a warrior," Taemin said. "But warriors are not made by choice. They're made by necessity." He looked around the room at the faces watching him. Some were hopeful, some were worried, but all of them trusted him to make the right decision. "I accept the command," he said. "Finally. But I have conditions." "Admiral," Sulky said immediately. "I choose my own staff officers. I want people who will question my orders and offer better ideas when they have them. I will not surround myself with people who simply obey." "Agreed. I want complete tactical freedom. No political interference in military decisions. No orders from politicians who have never seen combat." "Agreed. And I want a promise from the Coalition Council. When this war is over, they will let me return to private life, if that is what I choose." "Oh, no parades, no monuments, no political careers." Admiral Selkie smiled slightly. "You haven't changed as much as you think. Those are the same conditions you demanded 15 years ago." Later, Taemin stood in the station's primary docking bay, wearing a new Coalition uniform. The rank insignia of Supreme Commander felt heavy on his shoulders, but his posture was straight and confident. The transport ship that would take him to Coalition Command was waiting. Around him, the people of Kepler Station had gathered to see him leave. Engineer So-young, Dr. Yoon-ji, Commander Haijin, Captain Dong-woo, Security Chief Jin-ho, and hundreds of others who had come to know him during his quiet weeks as a nameless worker. "Take care of those tomatoes," he told So Young. "Take care of yourself," she replied, "and come back when you can." As the transport ship pulled away from Kepler Station, Taman looked back through the window at the place where his secret life had ended and his duty had begun again. He had tried to run from his destiny, but destiny had found him anyway. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, the Vrex Empire was preparing for war. They thought they were facing the same humans they had fought 15 years ago. They were wrong. They were about to face humanity led by a man who had learned that true strength comes not from winning at any cost, but from finding ways to protect what matters most. The ghost of Proxima had returned, older and wiser, carrying the lessons of loss and the hope of redemption. The war that was coming would test everything he had learned about leadership, sacrifice, and the price of peace. But for the first time in 15 years, humanity faced the future with their greatest protector leading them once again. The stars watched silently as the transport ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying the reluctant hero toward his destiny and the battle that would decide the fate of human civilization.